Hello, hello, and welcome. I am so excited for tonight's topic. It's all about healing from toxic trauma and how, in that healing, it helps you build healthy relationships. And I'm super, super excited to have this conversation tonight because it's so important for those of you that are really looking to attract that healthy relationship, that partner that's loving, that's understanding. And many times, that toxic trauma from the past and past experiences can come up and sabotage that. So tonight we're really gonna address, right, the elephant in the room on how to heal this toxic trauma so that you can have those healthy relationships, so that you're not pushing away the good guys, so that you're not keeping yourself from actually having the joy of having a healthy relationship. So I'm so excited for this conversation tonight. I want to welcome you all, those that are here with me live, those that end up watching the replay. Make sure you say hello to me in the comments. And for starters, when you think about the word healing, right, I want to know what comes to mind for you. So drop it below, say it out loud. What's healing to you, right? For many of us, we might think of a time when we were injured and maybe we fell, right? We were young and riding a bike, we fell and we got injured. And then, right, there was this process of healing. So, what does that look like when you're looking to heal from a toxic trauma related experience? And the truth is that when you look at the word healing and the meaning of it, it means to restore back to whole, to restore back to wholeness. And when you think about wholeness, right, it being whole and complete and in the way that, right, in an unblemished way, many of us don't even have that when it comes to relationships from the start, right? Now, you think about, where do we get these ideas on how relationships are supposed to be like? And a lot of it comes from our upbringing. But the truth is that when we encounter a traumatic event, when we encounter toxic relationships that create trauma within us, it shifts the perspective on what's whole, right? What is whole? What's a wholesome relationship? And for many of us, that idea becomes distorted because you've experienced trauma, because you've experienced a toxic relationship. So in healing, right? Healing is a verb, it's an action word. So there is some action that needs to happen. But healing also happens naturally, right? If you think of that time when you were a little kid and you were riding your bike and you fell, scraped your knee, right? If you really didn't pay attention to it, it probably would have just healed up on its own, right? How many of you have ever gotten a paper cut, right? Those tend to heal up. You don't even notice them. It's just like, the moment of impact, right? And then it heals on its own. So if it heals on its own, right? I know a lot of people say, well, time heals, time heals. And yeah, time can heal. But now take, for example, if your foot was broken when you fell off the bike, if it would have been left alone and not tended to and put in a cast and set the right way, it would have healed wrong, right? It would have healed incorrectly. It would have became a whole bone again, but in the wrong way. Not right, not correctly healed. So I say this, and I'm sharing this analogy to give you a bit of a picture of this sense of healing, right? So it can happen naturally, but if not tended to right, it doesn't heal the right way. So how can we take this idea of healing and apply it to healing trauma and healing from toxic relationships and really, once again, bringing this idea of wholeness. And once again, it's going to start, right, with your ideas of what is whole? What is that wholesome relationship that you're looking to create? Like I said, for many of us, we have a distorted idea because of our upbringing, perhaps childhood trauma, or our experiences in building relationships as you got older and started dating. And this idea of what it's supposed to look like is so key, because what happens is many times this idea of what it's supposed to look like is possibly toxic, right? Is the interfered with triggers from trauma, ideas that have taken the place of what's supposed to be wholesome, right? It's like, once again, if the bone broke and it's not set the right way, you heal in this, right, in this wonky way. So what do, right? It has to be rebroken and then recast to actually heal the right way. And now who's to say what's right and wrong? And that's where you come in. You, the amazing woman that you are, that has been through things in her life, but is at this stage and is at this point in her life where she knows what she wants in a relationship, where she knows how she wants to be treated. And even if you don't, you're willing to find out, right? Because once again, right? Even though there are hundreds of books on relationships, right? Perhaps you've read some. If you have, please drop some in the comments so that, we can get a reading list going. I'm currently working on my book, right? So we have these things that we can pick at, but there's so many contradicting ideas, and there's so many different points of views, and there's so many different perspectives. There's so many, right, philosophies on how this is supposed to be. And the reality is that you get to choose. You get to choose what is this wholesome relationship that you want to experience. If you're wanting a relationship where you feel safe, where you feel secure, to be able to voice how you feel, to voice your desires, what you want, what your needs are in this relationship, then you want a partner that's receptive, that's supportive, that's open, that's present in being there for you, and being that partner that can together build that space to make that happen, right? So this idea of healing starts with this wholesome idea, this wholesome view and vision of what you want that relationship to be like. And once again, for many, it's distorted because of past experiences. So how do you, right? How do you build this wholeness of a relationship when there are these traumatic events, these things that trigger you and that come up and that put you back into that space of feeling hurt, right? Because what happens is when you experience a traumatic event, and many times toxic relationships, is you get into this panic state, right? This fear state where in your brain, in your mind, right, you're just looking to survive, right? No matter what the situation is, you're looking to make it out of this alive. You're looking to make it out of this whole. And what happens is we create these adaptive behaviors to make it through, these coping mechanisms to make it through the relationship, to make it work, right? How many of us have been in relationships that were toxic, were no good, and still, because we were so emotionally involved, emotionally invested, we tried to fix the situation. We tried to make it work. We hung in there, right? As the loyal woman, as the ride to die, wanting to be there for that partner that was not reciprocating, that was actually damaging your self-esteem, damaging this wholesome idea of a relationship that you have, and shattering that vision of love and a healthy relationship that you wanted to cultivate with them, right? So this wholesome relationship is what you get to create, is what you get to now put into motion, right? Because we said it's a verb, healing is a verb, and we get to now create, right? So it's like going back to our breaking leg example, or falling off your bike and having a wound, right? If you have an open wound, if you don't tend to it, right, it could get infected. If you're not careful and stuff falls into it, dirt, sand, some irritants, right? Anything goes in there, it can potentially fester and start to rot and not heal and start pussing and create infection and sepsis and all of this stuff. So the reality is that the first thing is bringing awareness, right? Awareness to this wound, this emotional wound. And many of the times we get to recognize these wounds when we're triggered. When things happen, when things are said, when something challenges our position, our idea on the matter, right? So I know I was having a conversation the other day with someone, and they were triggered by me saying, right, that healthy relationships are possible, even after being in a traumatic experience, even after going through toxic relationships. Healing is possible. It's going through childhood trauma, right? No one is saying it's easy, but it's possible, right? It requires, right, this healing process thing that we're talking about. And it created a reaction that clearly there was something there. There was something that triggered a reaction in the person that I was speaking to. And I share this with you because many times this is how we become self-aware, right? We're just living our lives, living our best lives, being programmed, right, by society, the things we watch, the cultures we're in. We have these sets of ideas and beliefs that are ingrained in us. And then something happens in life, changes those beliefs, and now you hear something that's contradicting your beliefs, right? How many of you, and this is like a very clear example of how someone can become triggered. How many of you know anyone that's like religious, like super religious? You want to share, I don't know, a quote or something spiritual, and they can't even receive that because they are so religious, right? Because they're so closed in to the ideology that they believe in, right? And for many women, going through trauma and experiencing toxic relationships creates that negative charge, that negative association, that if someone was to tell you healthy relationships are possible, there is something in you that's triggered, right? Like, well, not if you've been through trauma because XYZ, and then going into, right, like having to prove a point that because you were a victim of something that you cannot have a healthy relationship. And I want to bust through that right now because that's so far from the truth, right? Unfortunately, these relationships and these events are not just obviously something that needs to be processed and worked through, but it's a moment where you gain so much self-awareness because you become hyper vigilant, right? Once again, you're triggered into that survival mode. You become hyper vigilant. You're looking for all the things that could hurt you, that could potentially bring you down, shatter the vision of that love that you want to create. And you are trying to protect yourself. And that's why so many times when there has been a traumatic event, there has been a toxic relationship, you become hyper vigilant. You become the person that, might not want to let anyone into your life. You might have a hard time trusting people. You might, push people away because you do not want to put yourself in a position to be hurt again, to feel cheated, to experience that pain again, to feel cheated, to feel rejected, to feel, less than, unworthy, to have someone come and challenge, right? Your self-esteem, your self-worth, and shatter your confidence. So I share this with you because it is in us to cultivate that self-awareness, right? To cultivate being not just reactive to the things that are going on because it triggers you, but being aware and knowing how to respond. That's part of the healing process, right? Being able to recognize in the moments that you are triggered, that those feelings come up, and knowing how to navigate that. Now, back to our wound to our wound example. Now, take an open wound. If you're looking to care for that wound, you might throw some peroxide in there. That's going to sting, that's going to hurt, right? No one said healing was pleasant. The broken leg that didn't set right, if you have to re-break it to reset it, that's going to hurt. And sometimes the shedding of those layers and those beliefs that no longer serve you shatter, right? It shatters the vision that you had, and it hurts. So healing isn't all sunshine and roses. It's a process of processing your emotions, processing your thoughts, really becoming self-aware so that you don't fall prey to the automatic response of experiencing trauma, the automatic response that your body goes into shock, trying to protect itself, trying to survive, right? Those coping mechanisms that you develop from being in a toxic relationship. So it really comes down to, once again, as you're looking to heal this wound, it might not be the most pleasant at first, right? Having to come face to face with the wounds, having to face them, having to acknowledge them, having to embrace them. Because so many times we want to be in denial. Like, yeah, that happened, but we've made it this far. You've excelled at work. You've excelled in your life. You've picked yourself back up. You've made a life for yourself. For my single moms out there, you've done what you had to do to provide for your family. You've, in your life, you've gotten it together. But the reality is, right, that those emotional scars have been put to the side, have been put behind. And this is where people go, yeah, well, time heals. Yeah, but if it's not set right, then it healed wrong, right? The bone is still twisted. So the moment that you go back to start dating, it's going to come up. The triggers are going to come up. Those feelings, those emotions are going to come up as you start talking to people, building relationships, and now it's like it resurfaces. Right? Now those feelings the emotions are coming up to the surface, bubbling up. What do you do? What do you do? So the first things first, recognizing it, right? Recognizing I have a wound. The second thing, tending to that wound. Figuring out, what do I need to do? Does this wound need stitches? Do I just need a Band-Aid? Do I just need some ointment, right? Some triple antibiotic ointment? Like, what do I need? And that's a blessing that I get to help my clients figure out. What do they need for their particular situations, right? We can, of course, overgeneralize and kind of talk about the patterns that are most common out there. But the reality is, right, we all have our own time period of processing things. And the reality is that we also get to choose, right? How fast or how slow do we want to heal this? Right? Are we going to put cream and then stitch it? And then are we going to do the works on this baby so that it heals up quick? Or are we going to do, we're going to put a little ointment today and then tomorrow we're going to rip off the scab? And that happens many times too when it comes to relationships. You get out of one toxic relationship, boom, end up in another one with a guy who is just like the last one. because those issues haven't been resolved, because that trauma hasn't been processed, that those toxic patterns haven't been recognized and dealt with. So, once again, one, that self awareness, that acknowledgement of the wound, of the trauma, of the toxic coping mechanism or toxic behavior, right? Being able to recognize it and pinpoint it and say, well, what do I want to do about this? Right? Then it comes to tending to it. How are you going to tend to it? What I work with my clients and what I like to do is create that vision of what you want that love to look like. You want a healthy partner that's loving, that's supportive, that's ready for commitment, that's serious about being in a relationship, that's not going to freak out when you have a moment where you need to be heard and you need to be understood, but that's going to be open and genuine and supportive and wanting to be there with you and wanting to know more about you, wanting to do this together. Right? Because the reality is in relationships, it's not, right? It's not always sunshine and roses. There's challenges, there's tough times, and it's how you overcome those tough times together as a couple that builds the intimacy and builds the depth of a relationship. So it starts with you, right? If you can't hang in there in the sting, right? Like when you're pouring peroxide or alcohol on a wound, if you can't hang there in the sting of your own wounds, right? How can you expect someone else to? So it all does start with you. Tending to the wound, recognizing the wound, and then visualizing, okay, how do I want this to be? How do I want this to look like? And then the truth is, if you're wanting a relationship, you got to come out of hiding, right? You got to come out of hiding. And once you allow yourself to start getting to know people, you're a lot more discerning now. You're going to be able, it's practice, it's hands-on practice, right? As you're having conversations, as you're meeting people, you will be triggered. Things will come up, whether internally, concerns that are like legit red flag concerns, but you are now in a position where you know what you want. You've been through what you know you don't want. And you now get to choose, okay, well, do I want to give my time and energy into someone that's, throwing red flags up and down? Or do I want to remove myself and not invest my time or energy in that? Because I know better. I know where that's going to lead me to, right? So, all in all, healing these toxic patterns and these traumas and all these experiences that have left that impression, right, that have created these triggers is all about facing them, recognizing them, and being able to move through them. Because once again, we said healing is a verb, so it does require action. Right? Just leaving it alone and letting time heal. Like we said, if it's not healed right, like a broken bone, it's not going to set right. The bone is going to heal all twisted. So you have to make sure that when you're healing it in the right way, in the way that you want to feel, the relationship that you want to have, the life that you want to create for yourself. You don't want to feel defensive every time a guy speaks to you, or you want to be overreactive when someone says something to you that was genuine and meant no harm or didn't come from a bad place, right? But if you can't recognize those triggers, you're going to continue on the same hamster wheel of the trauma and the hurt and reliving it and being so identified by what happened and being stuck in the story of what happened, as opposed to, well, where are we going? This is the vision that I'm creating. This is the love that I want for me. This is the relationship that I want for me. And yes, that happened. And yes, that sucked. And yes, it was valuable in my life because it taught me a lot of things. And now I'm going to take the things that I learned and I'm going to apply it to the life that I want to create, that I get the chance to create. But only if, once again, we take action. Because even in healing, right? Like we said, healing is a verb. It takes action. So I'm so excited that we got to have this conversation today. This is exactly what I do when I work with my clients. I help them move through the triggers that come up when they've experienced toxic relationships, where they've had childhood traumas or traumas in these toxic relationships that leave an imprint, that leave an impact that doesn't allow them to fully open up and trust and start building those healthy relationships. So if this is something that you would like support in, make sure to reach out, send me a DM with the word toxic. We'll talk about what some of your triggers are and what is it that you're looking to heal through. Because once again, the reality is that yeah, you could say like the paper cut, right? If it's a little small wound and it's a paper cut, time heals and it'll close up. But if it's a big wound that's festering, that has the potential to become infected, that needs stitches, alcohol, peroxide, might need surgery, right? Then you need the broken bone to be set right, not just the paper cut that's gonna take a couple of days to heal and you haven't even noticed, right? So with that said, thank you so much for joining me tonight on this conversation. Let me know what was most helpful for you in the comments. And once again, remember, it is possible to have a healthy relationship after experiencing trauma, after being in a toxic relationship. And that healing starts with you because healing is a verb. So remember always to choose you, choose love, stay blessed, and I will see you soon. Have an amazing night.